So you placed a candidate and then they dropped out. So this was actually a message that I got from somebody who had recently placed a candidate into a new role. And after a few days of them starting, the candidate decided to just not turn up for work and go and take another job. And it was literally a case of candidate who I placed has dropped off. The candidate started on Monday and in his first week has said he will no longer show up to work and has found another opportunity which he believes is better for him and his career development. What do I do? That was effectively the question that I got. And I'm going to answer this in the form of being a business owner and looking down over a business and looking over the whole recruitment process and understanding what actually happened and how to break it down so you can prevent it from ever happening again. So this is how we do it. So a few different angles I'm going to look at, starting at first with the candidate's perspective. So firstly, we've got to ask the question, like, what that candidate has done. At the end of the day, he's hoping to get a job which is better for him. So a better opportunity at the end of the day. And we've just got a question, is it genuinely a better opportunity? And I ask that because sometimes when somebody is looking for a job, they can be blinded by something which is almost like a shiny object syndrome. So for example, let's just say your goal is to progress your career to another level of management. And you consider this new opportunity, and the opportunity presents itself as pretty much the same opportunity as what you already have, except that it pays 30 or 40% more than what you're on at the moment. Now, there's an example of a shiny object syndrome moment where you may be attracted to the opportunity because it pays 30 to 40% more. Although very attractive, that wasn't the motive why the candidate was looking in the first place. So you have to clarify that in the first place. Like, is it genuinely a better opportunity for the candidate? That's number one. Number two is, how has the candidate come to that decision? Like, is it a genuine career opportunity because it's been described as such? Is it because it actually is the case, and what they're going to put in place, i.e. the new employer that they're considering, what they're going to put in place is that practical, measurable steps that you can put in place immediately to say, yes, on day one, this is recognizably a much better opportunity. So that's first two things. The next one is to consider the candidate's perspective from a motives perspective, which is when they first made contact with the recruiter, what were their motives? What were they actually looking for? Because similar to the first one, which is like a shiny object syndrome, the same thing applies later on here. Like, are they attracted because of something else? Are there other variables that are coming into it? And one of the things that comes into it is, were they talking to loads and loads of recruiters, and how many interviews did they have? Because if a candidate has 10 job interviews and they're talking to 10 different recruiters or more, then it can be very confusing. And when you're in that confused state, it becomes really, really difficult to make a very concise and spot on decision for what is best for you and your career. So, as somebody who has been a job seeker or somebody who has helped people find jobs as well, you have to consider it from the candidate's perspective. Like, what are all the variables for why this candidate took this perspective, and correct course with the candidate, ideally on a phone call, first off, to see if they're actually making the right decision. That's first thing. Let's get that out of the way. So let's just say all of this is aligned, meaning that it's genuinely a better opportunity. The candidate has come to a very informed decision, and it's a very practical one, and they weren't overwhelmed with interviews or recruiters, and they weren't being pressured into this, and they weren't even desperate when they're looking for a new job. Okay, cool. Let's get that bit cleared out. Next thing is, we're going to look at it from the client's perspective. So the career opportunity that is being offered with the new company, could it have been offered with the one that the candidate has just left from? And you have to ask this question. The only way you can ask that question is by asking the client and by understanding what the candidate is being driven and motivated and attracted by. And then once you've got all that information, you go to the client and say, hey, Mr. Client, like, this is what's going on. This is why the candidate is looking. And considering a new opportunity, could this have been presented here? Now, if the answer to that is yes, then there has been a breakdown in communication, meaning that the motives for the candidate looking for a new opportunity, if they were understood by the recruiter in the first place, then those motives were not relayed over to the client. Because if a hiring manager knows the drivers behind somebody who is looking to join their organization, and they don't make an offer or present an opportunity that directly connects with that person's motives, then they're not going to be attracted to the opportunity. They're just not going to be that interested. So, and it's even worse if you know what their motives are and then you present them an offer which is not aligned with their motives. So it makes it really worse. And this is where it all comes together. So, number one, was there clear communication? Can it be offered with the current employer? And if it is, then you can go back to the candidate and say, hey, hang on, we overlooked this for a moment, but the thing that you're looking for in that company, it already exists here. And what you're potentially doing is burning bridges with one company, and you might be better off just staying there because you've already been there a few days. You already know who the team are. So that's one part of it. Just keeping in mind that while I'm going through this conversation, I have to remove like the emotional element of potentially losing a fee and being in a very difficult situation with your client, and then being fearful of losing the client. Like, you have to remove all the emotion, because at the end of the day, you're either going to recover from this in the sense that you are going to learn from it and you're going to educate the client and you're going to build better working relationships with the client, or you're not going to recover from it and you're just going to live in misery and you're just never going to get over it. So either it's going to be a learning curve with the current client, or it's going to be a learning curve for all future clients. And I prefer both. So, we just got to remove the emotion as we're going along. So why, what, and then we just got to ask the question, were the motives expressed on both sides? Meaning that why the candidate was looking for a new opportunity and why the client was looking to hire, did they match up and did they align? And if they did, brilliant. Cool. Then we've got all this cleared. So now let's clear out those two things. The last one is from a recruitment perspective, meaning that I'd want to be doing due diligence with the recruiter at hand just to understand and make sure. Like, did the recruiter know that interviews were still being carried out by the candidate? Like, clearly the candidate was still attending other interviews. Unless this happened at really short notice, the candidate accepted the job, and then a couple of days later, another company offered, and the candidate was always inclined towards that offer. You would have known about this, because when you're at a stage where the candidate has received a job offer, usually the candidate would say, hey, I've got this other opportunity, I really like it, and I'm waiting for an opportunity or waiting for an offer from that company before I move forward into this role. And when you hear that situation play out, it's like a lot of recruiters try and pressure the candidate into taking that opportunity, the one that they're representing. I mean, yeah, it's a tactic, but you're going to walk into this problem if that is the case. Or there's another part of a recruiter, which is they're going to just ignore the fact that there's this other opportunity and just say, here you go, just take it anyway, and then we'll worry about it later. And then here you go, you're in this situation. With the final one being that they never asked the question anyway. And if they didn't ask the question, that is this the final interview? Like, is this deal done? Is this completely done and dusted? There's no more job searching. This is it. If they didn't even ask that question, then we're not able to diagnose the problem either way. So, and that leads on to the second point, which is, did the recruiter actually get a very firm commitment from the candidate to say, hey, look, this is what we were looking for. This is what we were aiming for. Let's, get this done, basically. So getting a firm commitment from a candidate is a pretty important thing. So, and then moving on is reflecting back. So if we look back to when we first started working with the candidate, was the candidate desperately looking for a new role? Were they eager to leave? Did they just have a fallout with their manager? Or were they being made redundant? Did they have no job at all? Like, what was going on in that situation? And when you consider all of these variables, what was going on? What were their motives? What were they looking for? Did the client align? And you ask all of these questions all the way down in detail, only then you can realize actually that was the point that we missed. Because if we had asked that question at that moment in time, at that precise moment, then we would have avoided this position. Because this candidate, for them to start a new opportunity, work for a few days, and then leave for another opportunity, that they were still considering other opportunities, even though that they had accepted this job. So we need to figure out where the breakdown was. Was it because the current company didn't sell themselves well enough? I mean, this could play out in literally any company. Like, you could be running a recruitment business and somebody starts with you, and a few days later they're leaving just after they've started. Like, what is it? We had an employee do that because of a medical condition at one point. I would have been distraught if it was because they took a job with another company, but it wasn't because of that. There was a medical condition, so wishing that person the best. But either way, this can happen literally in any business. And last but not least is, were there any other recruiters that were involved in this situation, making the final point, is there anything that you as a recruiter can do to persuade this candidate to stay exactly where they are? And this could be anything. Like if they are attracted by a shiny object syndrome, then you can talk to the client to see if you can make it a little bit more shiny. Like, can they adjust the pay? Can you even incentivize them using the commission that you might be getting? There's a load of things that you can do to play around with this. So, provided all of these things have been met, and you went through absolutely everything, the client was fully aware, the candidate was fully aware, there was no serious competition, not a load of recruiters that were being involved, all of these things that I've mentioned here were completely ticked off, then the final and the ultimate thing to do is to inform the client and then start looking for a replacement for the candidate, because your relationship with the client is going to be dependent on how well you deliver for the opportunities that they present to you. And even if you did do an amazing job in filling this particular requirement, ultimately you showing more commitment in following up and finding a replacement is only going to earn that trust even more. So that is all for this one, and I will see you next time.